Well, I think we keep marching forward. I think the important thing is to engage the community on how to unroll this in a way that will do the least amount of harm, but recognizing that doing nothing is just simply not an option. The proliferation of guns in our streets specifically, the semi-automatic weapons that we're seeing on a very regular basis throughout many, many neighborhoods in our city, including our downtown area, is horrifying, and it's time we do something about it. I'm grateful that we do have a path through the current state law that gives our cities, any city in the state of Missouri, the ability to restrict the open carrying of firearms, and I think it's time we take that step forward.
Back on the gun legislation, do you see the language that currently exists as being what will end up in a form of a vote, or do you see anything structural that needs to change before that happens?
I mean, I think that there's a number of structural issues with the bill as stands. We got an opinion from the city councilor, and our attorney from the board also agrees that we do not have the authority under state law to confiscate firearms. So the best that we can do is to assess a $35 fine. And so I think we have to ask ourselves whether this is this can actually do what we are wanting it to do. And I think as part of that process, we also have to make sure that we're not enacting laws that would codify stop and frisk type policies that have also been struck down as unconstitutional. So I think there's still a lot of work that has to be done. I think we have a shared agreement that we must address gun violence and do everything we can that's within our authority to get guns off the street, but we have to do it in a way that's smart and in a way that's legal and in a way that will be upheld in court, because we will be sued over it.
I just want to make a couple corrections there. The confiscation clause is a minor piece of the bill, and it's a legal term related to the keeping of the gun in the long term. I don't think there's anything that prohibits us from safe harboring it at the time of breaking a local law and ordinance. Secondly, the $35 cap is just for people that have an open carry permit but fail to present it. There's other mechanisms for folks who don't have an open carry permit, and that would really apply to anybody under the age of 19, because under the state of Missouri, you can't obtain a concealed carry permit unless you're 19. So the state law, the preemption bill that went into effect in 2014, is very specific in how a jurisdiction within the state of Missouri can restrict the open carrying of firearms. It outlines it very specifically. And Board Bill 29 conforms to that bill, that law, pretty stringently. So there's not a lot of wiggle room in how we can change the meat of Board Bill 29, because it walks directly through the eye of that needle. But the president of the board is absolutely spot on with regards to the city councilor's perspective on the permanent confiscation of the gun. And so that's something we need to work through. And I think, as far as the next steps to what you alluded to earlier, having those robust conversations about how to do the least amount of harm to communities and what the ramifications look like is really important. But importantly, I think what we need to be able to do is unwind where we've gotten. Back in 2014, when the state passed this bill, both St. Louis and Kansas City had local ordinances prohibiting the open carrying of firearms at that time. Immediately following passage of this bill in 2014, Kansas City took action and walked right through that needle, right through the eye of that needle. And the open carrying of firearms never became legal there, never became commonplace, and never became part of gun carrying culture like it has taken hold here in St. Louis. And now we are in a very, very bad place, a place where the open carrying of firearms has not only been legal, it's become commonplace, and we have to unwind from where we are. And it is a dangerous place. It is not a safe or healthy place to be in, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get back to where we need to be.
I also want to be clear that when talking with Kansas City, they actually don't enforce this law. They are concerned about the legality of it and being sued if they did enforce it, and their officers have also been concerned about putting themselves in harm for approaching people with firearms. And so, I think it's important that as we continue these conversations, we are learning from other cities and the challenges that they have had in being able to regulate guns.
Yeah, with Kansas City's bill, they haven't needed to enforce it because the open carrying of firearms hasn't become commonplace there. And I do want to assure members of the public that we've spoken to a wide swath of members of SLMPD who are overwhelmingly supportive of this bill and recognize, like many members of our public do, that doing nothing is absolutely not an option, that it is not safe or healthy for anybody to be walking down the street with an AR-15. This is not a good scenario for anyone, most especially that person carrying the weapon.
And if I can jump in as the vice chair of Public Safety Committee, I think, like Alderwoman Spencer said, this has been an issue, especially recently. We've been seeing a lot of these guns that have been like in the downtown area. It's been going on for a while, especially in St. Louis, and there's a difference between St. Louis and the way people carry guns and the way that they do in Kansas City. And I think what Alderwoman Spencer did yesterday was, start the conversation. And I think there has to be more of that, because what we also don't want to do, knowing that this legally could be challenged, is also put not just officers at harm's risk, but also people who may be holding a gun at harm's risk. The last thing we need is more people dying on our streets, not just law enforcement, but citizens too, and protests to break out. So while it is a needed thing that needs to happen, we also need to make sure that the right players are at the table, leaders that are actually maybe able to talk to these young people that are carrying these guns before we pass legislation, because we are in a crisis. We want to make sure that legislation that is passed is not just legally sounding, but or not just emotionally done. And I think we all are sick and tired of seeing people. I mean, as a resident of North St. Louis, I'm sick and tired of hearing gunshots in my community. But how do we do this in the right way, where we don't put either individuals at harm's risk and not get sued in the long haul?
Where is that bill in the process? I know there was a committee hearing yesterday. Is it still in committee?
It's still
right
in
now?
committee.
Okay.
For clarification, Kansas City, were you saying that the police, they're not enforcing it because they're fearful to approach somebody openly carrying? Isn't that a police officer's job?
Well, there's two issues that we heard. One was it's not being enforced because they're concerned about it actually being legal. And the second is concern that approaching somebody with a firearm can result in an escalating experience.
Like a police shooting?
Yes. And so we, whatever policy we end up with, we have to make sure that it's one that is protecting residents of our city, and it's also not putting our officers in harm's way.
But somebody found in violation of this proposed bill, if it becomes an ordinance, the police would not be able to confiscate that gun.
Correct. And what we are waiting from the city attorney right now is whether the term safe harboring is actually any different than confiscation. If there is a legal definition that can create a hair of difference between those things, then I'm definitely interested in hearing that. But I think the end goal everybody wants to see is getting guns off of our streets, and we have to make sure that the policy that we're enacting actually allows us to do that.
The city councilors, the confiscation piece that is up for debate right now is at conviction. Okay, what we're talking about is safe harboring it at the time of breaking the law. And so there is a very significant difference. So the concern would be confiscating the gun at conviction, and so removing that from the bill is a very minor piece. That is after it's been removed from the street and it's gone before city court. One thing I'll point out that's really interesting about this path, as opposed to what many of us have been saying for many years, is the state of Missouri needs to take action. And the state of Missouri, make no mistake, it needs to take action. But if the state of Missouri were to take action, this would be a criminal offense. It would go on someone's criminal record. It would be a permanent blemish on someone's ability to get a job and lead a productive life. A city ordinance violation is just a city ordinance violation. It's not on anybody's permanent criminal record. And the judges the folks who get to decide the end result of this answer to our city councilor. They're within the power of city government. It's a very different scenario than having the state take action. So our prosecutors, in cases of city ordinances, answer to our city councilor and are directed by by our own body. So in this particular proposal, the city of St. Louis has an enormous amount of control over what happens. And I think that's a unique situation to start to address some of the concerns, the very real concerns of the danger of the folks carrying guns, our police officers, and the communities that are already so impacted by gun violence.
And as you can tell, this is a very passionate, topic for many of us, and this is obviously an ongoing discussion that will take place in our Public Safety Committee, and I would encourage you all to follow it there. And we're happy to take questions on any other topic at this time.
I
Can I
want to
just
say
ask-
one more
Yeah.
thing with this though, and I'm gonna take off my alder lady hat and put on my mother hat. As a mother today, Mom's the Man action. We all put on our orange. We all want action. I hear again in these conversations that we have confiscating and we have safe harbor. But as a mother of a child that attends Central Vision Performing Arts, where was the safe harbor with that situation? Where was the confiscation law with that situation? When our officers did absolutely everything they could multiple times to help this parent and reach out. So as we move forward on this legislation and other legislation, I think that we need to be careful on how we give hope to our constituency and how we then spread the hope to our constituency, if it's real or if it's not. If it's something we can do, if it's not, I think we need to move our legislation that can really make the changes that, again, parents, mothers, constituency bases, our entities, our departments, everybody needs here as it relates to these gun laws. So, again, I don't want us to get caught up in all of these different terms when it makes sense to our constituency based on how to keep them safe.
And again, would encourage you all to follow the discussion in our Public Safety Committee.